Hello and welcome back to Tree of Statism, Good and Evil. I'm Noah Goodman. Today we're going to be having a practical discussion and less of a moral one. That is to say that we're going to be discussing conflicts and we're not going to be talking about these guys or those guys being the good guys. We're going to be talking about these leaders and those leaders being responsible or irresponsible. A question I want to ask you is a very, very popular question in politics. And then what? What happens next? This question often exposes half-baked plans, because you might take some action and there will be some kind of response. And then you want to ask, and then what? What is going to be the response? For example, if a country attacks another country, even in a limited scope, this can start an all-out war. It often starts all-out wars. In such a case, the question, and then what, asks if the objective of the limited attack justifies an all-out war. A great example of a well thought out answer was in the 1973 Yom Kippur War, also called by the Egyptians the October War. The Egyptians had a very, very simple plan. During the first 2 days, they would take 20 miles and then bunker down. The Israeli reserves were expected to be the bulk of the power and only arrive 2 days or more after the initial attack. By that time, SAM systems, surface-to-air missiles, were up and running. They also spread a bunch of anti-tank missiles all over the place. This is why the first counterattacks failed, and the war kind of reached a stalemate during the early stages. 50 years later, and a day, the Hamas militant group launched an attack during the Jewish holiday of Simchat Torah on more than 20 different towns and a few military bases. The death toll is over 1,000. Seems to be 1,300 during the first day. However, the numbers keep being mixed around. About 250 to 300 soldiers were killed on the first day, and about 1,000 civilians were killed on the first day. This started the operation or war called Iron Swords. This operation also requires a very serious question. And then what? What did Hamas expect would happen following this attack? What it seems that Hamas expected to happen were a bunch of things. The first is that Hezbollah and other militant groups in the north would keep Israeli troops there, through tension or through direct warfare, not allowing troops to concentrate in the south. Secondly, they expected to thrust Israel into a multi-front war, when Hezbollah and the PA and possibly Iranian proxies joined the war. They also expected the world to sanction Israel in case of a severe counterattack. They may have also expected Israel to stop the war altogether to negotiate for any captives taken. If, for example, they took 10 or 50 or 100 or what seems currently like 200 captives, that Israel would stop and negotiate for them at any price. It also perhaps was the point to make Israel look bad so that the people would turn on the government. People often turn on governments after military defeats. Hezbollah has recruited its reserves and has threatened to join the war. However, it has not yet joined the war. The PA and the Israeli Arabs have mostly stayed out of it. They may join later, but currently it seems they're not going to join. Also, Lebanese politicians have told Hezbollah not to join the war. They don't want to join the war. They see it as Gaza's war, and they do not want a repeat of 2006. You can call it a victory, you can call it a defeat, but however you look at it, Lebanon was kind of destroyed by the 2006 war in Lebanon. Instead of people or the world turning against Israel, America and several other Western powers have backed Israel up. The thing is that Hamas videotaped themselves and sent out videos of themselves committing war crimes, the kinds of things that Arabs do to each other. And when you're talking about the war in Syria, in Yemen, and the war on ISIS. However, this shocked a lot of the Western world, and they themselves documented themselves doing these things. Israel does not have a blind check. This is to say that Israel cannot do whatever it wants for an unlimited amount of time before it loses the support. However, this kind of support has not been seen since the Second Intifada. Also, perhaps it has not been seen since the 1967 Six-Day War. Any way you look at it, this is the first time in a long time that Israel is being seen as the victim and not the aggressor of this war. Israel has, instead of stopping the war, given the people of Gaza, 1 million people on the northern side of the Strip, orders to leave their houses and flee south. They have cut off the electricity, they have cut off the water. They returned the water to the south, but the death toll is also climbing. It's already reached thousands, and no one's going to be surprised if it reaches the tens of thousands. Was this predictable? Well, we look back at past conflicts between Palestinians, mostly Gazans, and Israel, and we actually find a interesting feature of wars between Israel and Gaza. In 2002, the Second Intifada ended with 3,100 Palestinians dead against 1,010 Israelis dead, a 3-to-1 death toll. In the 2006 Lebanon War, Hamas joined and opened a second front in the south. This ended with 400 dead Gazans against 11, about 36-to-1 death toll. In 2009, there was another war between Israel and Gaza. We're not quite sure about the numbers there. They range from 1,166 to 1,417 dead in Gaza against 13 dead Israelis. This is somewhere between 89 and 109 to 1 death toll. In 2014, Gaza lost another war with 2,310 dead against 73 dead Israelis, a 31-to-1 death toll. In 2012, 55 against 2, 27-to-1. In 2019, 25 against 4, a 6-to-1 death toll. In 2021, 256 died against 18 Israelis, a 14-to-1 death toll. In 2020, we saw 49 dead Gazans against 0 dead Israelis, an infinity-to-1 death toll, incredibly high. Currently, we don't know how this war is going to end. However, we're currently talking about 4,000 dead Gazans, 1,000 inside the borders of Israel, 3,000 on the Gazan side of the border. We don't know how much more died in the hospital. There's estimates of 500 more dead. We're going to be updated, but currently the death toll is 4,000 against 1,400, so about 3-to-1, and it's going to rise. This could have been expected because it's always high. One of the least expected things to happen was that Israelis put their differences behind them. They have called up 300,000 reserves. Protests have ceased and will likely return, but only after the war, maybe 6 months after, maybe a year after, maybe immediately after the war, but currently not during the war. Israel has a national unity government. Israelis have united behind the government and are preparing for war, for a proper ground invasion. One of the major things Hamas did not expect was American allies and others sending boats and navy vessels to help Israel. This kind of evens out the threat of a multi-front war. If a bunch of Iranian powers and militants join the war, then the Western powers may join the war. This may turn the war into either an all-out war with a bunch of different factions in the Middle East, or a very limited war concentrated around Gaza, where Israel and the Gazans fight and all the other factions stay out of it, threatening, if you join, I join, and if you join, I join, and everyone's kind of staying out while pointing the gun at each other. A bunch of these factions may stay out of it. A lot of them may have seen the first day as an epic battle that was a victory for Hamas. Others saw it as a stupid, suicidal attempt. And a lot of them just don't want to join in because responsible leadership is not being a populist. Populism is doing what's going to be popular for 10 days and regretted for 10 years. Responsible leadership is staying out of the stupid things that other leaders try to do and lead their countries to disaster. The result is going to be a major war for Gaza, or this is what it seems like it's going to be. This is going to have large geopolitical consequences, ones that might happen according to the scenario. The first scenario we should look at is that Gaza is going to fight this war on its own. It may be decimated, and it's going to prevent it from being able to aid the Shia Crescent in future wars. The other scenario that we're looking at is the Shia Crescent will join in large forces. We could be looking at a war where Israel and the West fight against Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and a bunch of militant groups in Iraq and Yemen. The battlefields are likely going to be Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, and Gaza, while a bunch of factories and war material are going to be bombed in Iran. Yemen is also going to probably be cut off, but no one's going to invade it because it's just a bunch of hills. There's nothing much to do there except to kill the locals. Lebanon may fracture after this war. We're not sure. It's a bit early to estimate because the locals don't want to join this war. A lot of them don't want Hezbollah to join the war because it's not their war, or they don't see it as their war. They see it as Gaza's war. The people in Iran are not all that fond of military investment abroad, much like the Americans don't like the war in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We're not quite sure, but the Shia Crescent may collapse altogether. If this happens, it's going to be a major, major hit for the Iran-China-Russia alliance, the Asian alliance, the biggest geopolitical rival of the Western powers. And this might be the biggest geopolitical failure for that alliance since the 2022 war in Ukraine, where Russia kind of ran its cavalry into pikes. Even without the Shia Crescent collapsing altogether, if major war factories in Iran are bombed, this is going to cut off a lot of the weapons being sent to Russia to help them in the Ukrainian war effort. This brings us to a very, very important point. Guerrilla tactics are dumb. They are entirely dependent on the big, strong country not using its full arsenal against you. Some countries may burn down forests or bulldoze cities. Thousands or tens of thousands may die from exposure to the elements. In this case, the war working for Gaza entirely depends on the world keeping Israel from using its entire arsenal. Something that we've already seen is not working. Israel has turned off Gaza's electricity. And this is a very, very important point to mention. If you're going to fight a country that can turn off your electricity by disconnecting you to the electricity they supply you, this war may fail. This is not even a question of is it moral or immoral. This is just cutting the branch on which you are sitting. This means the war was badly planned from day one because they were entirely dependent on Israel not cutting off water and electricity, which it could at a push of a button, We're not talking about bombing US plants thousands of miles away. We're not talking about fighting through hundreds of kilometers of uh, air surface to air defenses to fight through the entire front line to reach these things. These are things they imported from their enemies and thus were cut off very, very early. The war may have been popular during the first few days. However, populism is doing things that are going to be popular for 10 days and then regretted for 10 years. There is a reason the PA did not join. The reason is not that they love Israel or that they are on the same side as Israel. It is because they are not suicidal. Abbas knew that if he joins the war, he's going to lose it, and he's going to lose it fast, because there wasn't a good plan for how the war would shape out. My sympathies go out to the Gazans. You have to understand, they're going to suffer the future Hamas has chosen for them. This war is going to be very, very bloody for them. The possible humanitarian crisis in Gaza has led Egypt to close its borders in order to stop millions of refugees from coming in. They do not want to take them in. This kind of shows you that they do not see themselves as brothers. If millions of Jews were killed in a different country, Israel would send planes to save them and to help them escape towards Israel. Egypt could open the border through the Rafah border cross and just let a million people through. It could let all the civilians through. It's just choosing not to because it doesn't want them. But why doesn't it want them, you may ask? Well, the Palestinians have a bad track record. They revolted against the King of Jordan in 1970. They started the Lebanese Civil War in 1975. They supported the Syrian rebels in 2011. They supported Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1991. They kind of have turned a lot of times on their Arab hosts and on their Arab brothers. In this case, they have joined the Shia Crescent. They have joined the major alliance that is threatening most of the Arab world, and now none of them want to save them. Egypt is not even willing to take in refugees. I must mention two conspiracy theories that I have heard. However, both of them seem a bit off. The first one seems very, very off. The theory is Iran wanted Gaza to lose because nothing would tear Saudi Arabia away from Israel, away from the normalization process more than seeing Israel crushing Gaza. The second theory is a bit more likely, however, I feel a bit dirty even mentioning it. The thing is that Hamas and other Arab states often move the goalposts. So, it is entirely possible that while they declared victory, it was a lie. Um, Even saying this kind of feels like I'm moving the goalposts in order to say, well, actually, they actually failed because they were actually trying to do 20 other things that they did not claim and were probably not, may or may not have been on the table. But the theory is this. The theory is that they actually failed on day one and they were planning to take Ashkelon as well, a very large city near Gaza, and they brought enough food to fight for a month and about 15,000 guns, 1,000 missiles, and they thought they would succeed for much longer before failing. Is this true? Is this false? I feel a bit dirty even discussing it because it kind of feels like I moved the goalposts. However, it is entirely possible that they moved the goalposts. Instead of saying, we failed in our major objective, they can say, we succeeded in a bunch of different objectives, we did this, we did that. And it kind of seems like something is missing in this entire story, because the big question that's hovering over this war was, and then what? You go on a rampage for one day, you kill 1,000 civilians, you take hundreds of captives, and then what? How do you prevent Israel from cutting off water and electricity? How do you prevent them from bombing the shit out of your country? Like, you don't have surface to air defenses that can stop the Israeli bombings. You don't seem to have anything against artillery. If they started shelling you with 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 shells, what exactly was your plan? They seem to be toppling whole buildings at a time. They're kind of hitting in a kind of surgical strike manner. But what would you have done if they wanted to start just carpet bombing you? You don't have anything against that. You have some anti-tank missiles. However, are they enough? The question is, what exactly would prevent a second Nakba if Israel decided to use its entire arsenal? This leads us back to the central question. And then what? What exactly did you expect would happen? And the people who celebrated the massacre in the first few days, what exactly did you expect to happen? Did you expect them to say, well, they killed 1,000 of us, but we couldn't kill 1,000 back. We couldn't kill 5,000 back. We shouldn't kill 10,000 back. And this is definitely not a threat that could repeat itself. People in Israel have instead asked themselves, how do we know this kind of attack won't happen again in November, in December, in January? How do we know that we're not just going to live with the constant threat that one day, out of nowhere, boom, 1,000 people die? It could be me, it could be my cousin, we don't know who's going to die. And it could happen now and in a month and again in 6 months. This kind of create a reality which I'm not exactly sure what exactly you expected to happen after this. However, a responsible leader should be able to answer the question, and then what? What exactly is going to happen after you start your actions? There's going to be this kind of response, or maybe that kind of response. How are we going to deal with it? And if you can't answer that, well, you're a shit leader. In the book The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, he said to be very kind and courteous or have no mercy. The reason is that people take revenge over the smallest things, but they can't take revenge over the big things. The point here is that limited conflict is kind of a lie. Any limited conflict can lead to big conflicts, to big wars. Peace may be more stable, however, once you start the war, once you do some kind of action that may start a war, you don't know how it's going to end. Or perhaps we know exactly how it's going to end, and you should take into consideration the question, am I willing to face the consequences of a big war? Or perhaps maybe I should keep my mouth shut, maybe I should be a bit more diplomatic. If you like this video, please comment, upvote, and subscribe. If you want to help further, go and watch my other videos. And if you like them as well, do the same over there. Also, please share this video and any other video you might think people might take interest in. If you want to support me further, you can buy my book on Amazon, Ancapistan by Noah Goodman. Thank you for watching, and good night.